Good evening. I'm Tom Conrad, the Superintendent of Schools for the Nauset School District, and welcome to Superintendent Spotlight, an evening show that focuses on programs or people in our system. And tonight I'm bringing back a guest that I had here last year, and it's our business manager, Giovanna Vendetti. And welcome, Giovanna.
Thank you, Tom.
Good to have you here.
Nice to be here again.
You know, it's that time of the year.
Yes, it is.
We're in January and well into our budget process. And part of the reason I did this show was to give people some background and insight into certain programs and jobs that people do for us. And since it's budget season, I thought it would be helpful for the viewers to understand where we start and how this process goes. So. This is a process that started really at the beginning of the summer and our planning calendar-wise and so forth. So why don't you start to walk us through how we handle this?
We start the budget process as soon as the fiscal year ends at the end of June. So we close the books and then open up the new books. We start with personnel changes, any retirements, new hires, and that all flows through to human resources. And human resources, the director, Carol Forgione, takes all this information and has a huge spreadsheet with all this data. And this data is manipulated so that we have names, steps, lanes, date of hire, and those documents are used to get information onto the budget worksheets that we give to the principals at the end of November. So that's a working process because those white sheets are constantly in flux as personnel changes and movements happening throughout the year. It's not just at the beginning or the end, it's all over the place. So things are constantly changing, and we use those documents to prepare our budgets, where our budgets, anywhere between 85 to 90% of the budget is personnel. So we want to make sure that those sheets are as accurate as possible because they impact the budget process. So the principals sit with myself and the superintendent to go over their budgets, taking into account the personnel costs, and then everything else they populate. We populate the personnel costs, the transportation, the utilities, and then they go in and they look at the supplies, the materials, the textbooks, etc. And then we sit with them and we look to the budget guidelines that we get from the respective member towns, the 4 towns. Usually, 2.5% is the goal. Sometimes we can't achieve that because we have certain constraints. One year we had a new budget, a new contract with the transportation provider, and those costs increased 33%. So we have areas that we have to look at that are more difficult than others. So we look at the transportation, we look at the utilities. 1 year utilities were very high, depending upon the fluctuation in the market. So every year there's certain constraints. One of the biggest constraints is the town guidance, the 2.5%. And, like I said, personnel costs, personnel, utilities, those have a huge impact.
So Giovanna, just so that the viewers understand, we do multiple budgets, don't we?
Yes, we do.
And we do a budget for each of the 4 elementaries. So the Brewster Elementary.
Brewster has 2, one for the Eddy School and one for Stony Brook. Eastham Elementary has 1, Orleans Elementary, Wellfleet Elementary, and then we also have a budget for the region. We have a budget for the high school, the middle school, central office, and then region only.
So
so we're busy.
There's a lot of binders to look at.
Yes, there is.
And keeping it straight. And they're all independent of each other, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
So it isn't like we have the ability to put all this money together and divvy it up where we want to throughout the system. It's independent by school and by region and so forth.
Yes, it is.
That makes it a little bit more challenging, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So when we begin to talk about, you had mentioned in your opening remarks, fixed costs, and sometimes we hear people talking about zero-based budgeting and so forth, but we know that our labor cost by contract, as you mentioned, can be anywhere from 85 to 90% of the overall, the entire budget. And we're in a negotiating year, and so we're negotiating with all of our unions at this point. and we've built a number for potential settlement, not knowing exactly what that's going to be at this point.
That's correct. Each of the budgets has a line item at the last page of the budgets called Reserve for Negotiation, and that's a pool of money that we've set up to cover any of the negotiations. I can't divulge what's in there, but that includes.
Please don't.
No, that includes steps and lane changes and a percentage increase. And once the unions have ratified the contract, we come to an agreement, then that pool of money gets allocated to the various salary line items. And based upon what the negotiations come in at, there may or may not be anything left over.
You also mentioned in your opening remarks about the white sheets, or really understanding our personnel costs in terms of line by line and the changes that happen. It's safe to say that across the board we're not adding positions in almost all cases. We are seeing retirements, though, aren't we?
Yes, we are. And those retirements, if we have them early enough in the budget process, we factor them into the overall budget. We don't have a fixed time where teachers hand in their retirement letters. So it could happen during the process. We could get some after vacation. We could get some, as we're getting ready to close the budget process. So those have an impact favorably on the overall budget process, because any of those savings, go back into the bottom line.
Yeah. And beyond the fixed costs of the wages that we're talking about, we have some substantial fixed costs in other areas, don't we, like energy and so forth?
Yes, we do. Energy is a big part of the budgets. We work with an energy consultant, Mr. Richard Wolf, who is on the energy committee in the town of Brewster. He's been helping us out the last couple of years. So we'll get, right now we've budgeted, we've level funded those line items in the budgets pending his final report to us. And then we'll make the adjustments as we move through the budget process. Also, transportation is another item. A couple of years ago we saw huge increases in transportation. Now it's between 3.5% increase. So we've got that to factor in. And of course we also have in the region only budgets we have health insurance. That's a big part of our the region budget, as well as the elementary budgets. So that's something that is, it changes. The increase, last year we saw about a 10% increase. This year it could be anywhere between 10 and 12%. We haven't received final numbers yet, so we'll usually get those in the next month or so.
Yeah. So your unique position is dealing with 4 towns. And,
yes, we do.
Directly in relationship with benefit packages in each of the towns. And then the region operates really on its own. And that's why they have a region-only budget.
Yes, the region-only budget encompasses the high school and the middle school. And in the region-only budget, we have also the health insurance costs. We have pension costs in there as well. So it's unique.
And the towns, for the most part, give us each year some type of guidance in terms of what they would like to see the budgets come in at.
Yes, they do. We're provided with a letter from each of the town administrators indicating what percentage to look for increases. Usually it's 2.5%, and we try to abide by those guidelines. Sometimes we're not able to because of certain student needs, and so that has an impact on the budget as well.
It's safe to say that our communities are very proud of their schools and the success that the schools are having.
Yes, they
and
are.
One of the great challenges is keeping the existing program intact as we go forward.
That's correct. That's the primary goal of each of the budgets and the principal's goals is to maintain the existing programs with the resources available to us. We never want the children to be without, so we try to make that happen.
I'm anticipating going to a mini-town meeting with our new senator, Julian Sear, and I'm sure he's going to ask some questions about concerns we have, and for us, really, the cost of special education and transportation, particularly where the region was in a position when it came together of being promised 100% of that cost being covered. They're really difficult numbers for us on a yearly basis to stay on top of.
Yes, they are. I mean, transportation, the region gets reimbursed a percentage based upon our expenses, and that fluctuates year to year, anywhere between 60-65%. So that would be a huge help to the district if the percentage reimbursement was higher.
And special education, that's a moving target all the time, isn't it?
Yes,
Because,
it's based on the students' needs, and we always want to do what's in the best interest of the students. And we could have new families moving in, and the kids require special services. So Dr. Creddy is always on top of that, making sure that the kids get the services that they need.
And our goal, of course, is to keep our students in their hometowns as much as we can.
Yes. As recently as last year, we were able to move some students in a member town who had the programs in place, as opposed to putting them on a bus and transporting them either to the collaborative or out-of-district placements. So we try to keep the students in district, in their communities as much as possible.
And so when you talk about having the opportunity occasionally to move students around, it's because we don't want to see for a small group of students each town having their own and at a much higher cost.
That's correct.
And families have been very, very helpful in working with us to consider moving their son or daughter to another community's program.
That's correct.
Yeah, and the other piece of it is, and I'm going to go back to the process. Once you begin working on the personnel numbers and so forth, and you had mentioned you then pull in our building principals. The principals have a huge part in this starting in October, don't they?
Yes, they do. They look at their staffing needs for the upcoming year. They look at any retirements. They look at what programs they want to continue with, and we try to keep those programs in place. And what the makeup of the buildings. Do they need any additional resources with respect to materials, supplies, or is there something going on in the building that needs to be addressed? So it's a process, and it continues for a good 4 to 5 months.
It's safe to say that each of the building principals reach out to their entire staff and solicit their needs, and then the fun begins in terms of understanding what the costs will be and the expectations in terms of what the budget can eventually be at.
That's correct. Each of the principal asks their staffs for a listing of what supplies they need for the upcoming school year, and they provide that information, and that's all incorporated into the budget.
We've got much better at inventory, haven't we, over the years in terms of holding our building principals ultimately responsible for having accurate inventory so that we're not wasting materials and so forth.
That's correct. I mean, they look at what the teachers need, and they purchase what they need. They'll look at it again in after the winter break to see if there's anything else that they need, and they'll purchase accordingly.
It's safe to say going into this new budget season that we had an advantage last year with high budgeted numbers for energy. And that's not going to be our projection going forward, is it?
I think it'll be tight budgets. Right now we level funded everything. It all depends upon the winter. If we have a cold winter, we're using additional resources, and then that'll impact those budget line items, the energy.
So the principals have spent, I would say, up to 2 months analyzing their numbers and so forth. That leads to a number of meetings at central office with yourself and I, scrutinizing the budget lines and so forth. And that's quite a bit of debate and discussion relative to the needs and priorities and so forth. And then we're now at that phase where we're going into school committee meetings.
Yes.
And that process introduces the budgets into the school committees. And what happens from that point?
At that point, the principals present the budget to the school committee. We look at the various line items that are over 5%. So they'll go through, and that'll be the first round. And then at the next meeting, the school committee will go deeper into the budget, asking questions on specific line items. For example, if a specific line item increased, 50%, why? Sometimes the percentage increase is a misnomer because the dollar amount is so insignificant that the percentage is high. You could have a $50 increase, and you could say, well, it increased 150%. So we look at each specific line item, and each of the budgets has a set of justifications. So if you look at each line item, and then you look at the justifications explain what exactly is in that particular line item. And if there's any increase or decrease, the principals provide a lot of information in those reports.
So we actually produce a binder, don't we?
Yes, we do. Every year we have a beautiful binder that the principals spend a lot of time preparing. There's a lot of information in there, the past accomplishments for the school. There's lots of pictures. There's lots of information about enrollment in there. And then we have obviously the budget information and the justifications.
Yeah, that's where the board members get the line-by-line budget
That's
and
correct.
justifications that then answer each of the lines.
Yes.
And the enrollment information is very important to understand what's happening. Either it's rising or decreasing, or in
Right.
some cases it's stagnant and staying at a certain level. The other piece of it is that they have a section in that binder as well about grants and understanding if we're receiving any other dollar amounts relative to grants either through the state or the federal government.
That's correct. The grants, there's detail as to what is funded through those grants. Some personnel costs are funded through grants, and that's detailed in that section.
And so the process starts with the school committee reviewing the binder and the principals doing that presentation. And then this goes on for a period of time, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. We'll go through December, January, February. We try to have the information for the public, where we present the budget to the public. And then after that, usually there'll be March. We'll go through again, and then probably approve, the committee approves the budget in March and April for the town meetings in May. Wellfleet's town meeting is earlier than everybody else's, so they'll get their information a lot quicker.
So the issue is that what is the board doing? You're looking to really look intensely at these lines to agree with the principal's formation of the budget and ask questions, and from there we get to a bottom line that the board is comfortable with. It's safe to say that in all of our communities at some point there could be communication directly with FinComs and boards of selectmen.
Yes, we usually go to either both the FinCom or the Board of Selectmen. Some meet jointly, some meet separately, and we do go and we do present the school budget and we do present the region budget, and they do ask lots of questions.
And so the budget today in all of our communities probably isn't going to be the same as we finish up the process with.
That's correct.
And you had mentioned, for instance, that it was our decision a year ago that we're going to, as people retire, and when we say that they're retiring, they've turned their paper in to start the process, that we're going to recognize that potential savings in some cases and apply it to this budget.
Yeah, we usually provide a document saying this is where we started the budget process at. We received a retirement. Here are the savings, and we do indicate what the savings are. Sometimes the savings are substantial, depending upon the step that the teacher was at that's retired and the new teacher coming in. So those are savings, and those are most helpful when preparing the budget.
Sure. And of course, one of the concerns that is out of our control is the cost of insurance.
That's correct. That's correct.
And health insurance. And as you mentioned earlier, that we could see potentially over 2 years a 20% or more increase in the cost of health care benefits and so forth. And when we're looking at a 2.5 5% increase in the budget, that's a difficult number at times to sometimes hit.
That's correct.
And so I'm sure we'll be having some discussions relative to that going forward.
That's a definite, yes.
We also have this thing called the capital budget.
Yes, we do.
And that's it's ultimately the taxpayer is paying for all of our budget needs, but the capital is talking about our buildings, isn't it?
That's correct. I mean, we want to maintain our buildings to the level that they're at right now. We don't want the buildings to fall into disrepair. So each of the towns has a capital plan that the school committee brings forth to the towns for the upcoming year. For example, on the region, we have various items that we want to address. And the last couple of years, we've addressed items of life safety issue, things that we know that need to be done, and also projects that we know that we can accomplish within the summer months, because we only have a certain window to get these projects done, and it's very difficult to get these projects moving, because there's the procurement piece that we have to get done, and then we have to bid the projects, and then the project has to commence, and we only have from when school ends until the end of August. So it's a tight window, and recently we did some major renovations here to the high school courtyard, and that was done within that particular window. So it's a tight time frame, and we're trying to do the projects that affect life safety and things that we can get done in that time frame.
So the region has a capital budget for the high school and the middle school.
Correct.
And then each of our elementaries have a capital budget that's in relationship to their town.
That's correct.
And there are different ways of approaching that. Some of our towns are a 10-year plan, and 5, and the region as well as a 5-year plan.
That's correct. And we look at these plans annually. During the summer, my assistant Jim Nowak will sit with the principals, look at what their needs are. He'll also use the facilities report that we had done a couple of years ago for the high school, the middle school, and the region, and that is used as a guide to look at what needs to be accomplished with respect to capital projects.
And the issue with the capital, of course, is that it has to take into consideration, in some cases, equipment that just doesn't make it as long as we anticipated, and we have to shift that occasionally.
Occasionally, some things will come to the top as a priority, and something else will go to the bottom. We saw that in central office this past summer. So, we try to do what's in the best interest of the school, and things that can be done over the summer.
We're very fortunate to have the opportunity to have 2 separate budgets, in the sense that they're not competing with each other.
That's correct.
They're really presented separately and looked at from a totally different vantage point, and it's helped us, because over time, having specific money, say at the region, to take care of the buildings versus competing against getting new textbooks and things has helped us a great deal.
Yeah, we want to maintain the infrastructure.
Sure.
So that's a great way that the town set this up, so that we could maintain the infrastructure.
And that's and quite honestly, the taxpayers should expect that. I mean, they've invested a great deal of money into the facilities, and doing everything we can to keep them in the best shape, and the upkeep is is very, very important. And,
yes, it is.
And something you spend a lot of time on.
Yes, we do.
The interesting piece, I think, for the viewers is to understand that really there are 2 different processes in terms of the capital is driven in a separate way, and then the operating budget in its own way. So there's a lot of things that you have to stay on top of.
There's a lot of things at central office that are happening, yes.
The other piece I thought would be interesting for the viewers to know is the statement of interest, and that's through the Massachusetts Building Authority, School Building Authority, and we've made an application, haven't we, for
yes, we have.
consideration.
We've made 2 applications. We made an application this past April, and then the year before we did the first year. They said, thank you, but no thank you. And then this year we've sent in another application, and we were fortunate to have them come down to the facilities and speak with us. So that's promising. But we've worked on that the last 2 years.
So that took a lot of time.
Yes, it did.
And there's a major report that had to be turned in on a variety of items, both educationally.
Yes, it encompassed not only the education piece, but also the infrastructure.
Sure, and that's solely for the high school.
Solely for the high school, yes.
And the concept was that, and thank you to the taxpayers for the money for new roofs
Yes,
and new windows.
that's correct.
But at that time, when they looked at our facility, they thought that it could have a lifespan 20 years or plus going forward.
That's correct.
And so we're looking at a renovation project
Yes.
in that statement of interest.
That's correct.
And so I think one of the pieces we're anxiously awaiting is to hear whether or not from that visit. And we had 6 or 7 people come down.
It was a very nice meeting. They were very impressed with our programs. They thought the campus was unique, the way it was set up. Not your typical high school, but it went very well.
And we're anticipating getting some type of answer February 15th, aren't we?
That's correct, yes.
And so obviously a lot of people will be excited to hear if we were chosen. And,
Yes.
and if so, we would then begin having discussions with our town managers and town officials
That's
on this.
correct, yes.
And that's a regular process that you have going in place already, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
We meet a couple times a year with each of the town managers and their finance directors, just to give them an update as where we are, what we're doing, where the capital projects stand, so that they know that the money that they give to us on an annual basis for capital projects we are using. There was a time when those projects came to a standstill, nothing was happening, so there was unhappiness with that process. But between myself and my staff, we've done quite a bit.
Well, you certainly have, Giovanna, and I'm sorry to tell you we're out of time.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
But thanks for the insight, and I
Thank you
hope
for
that the
having me.
viewers understand the process a little bit better. And to our viewers, thank you, and good night.